Hi, everybody. This is Carrie from the Henry County Conservation Department. And to this point, people have come to the New World. They fought for it. They fought each other for it. They have used its natural resources and landforms as tactics to win wars. They moved west. They used America's natural resources to create industry. They entered into a new age of industry, and all the while, people are coming to America with a desire to be in the land of opportunity. When talking about immigration, there are two important points that need to be made. There are costs associated with immigration. Those could be economical. They've got assets or stuff that may have to be liquidated. They may have to sell. They may have to leave them behind. There are costs of transportation and travel itself, and then, of course, the cost of settlement once they get where they're going. There are emotional costs. They could be leaving loved ones behind and leaving familiar surroundings, and maybe it's a home that they've been at for generations. There are also cultural costs. They are leaving a region that probably has a particular cultural characteristic of maybe a way of life, a language, a religion, or even traditions. Now, they also might have to adapt to a place that's quite different from the society that they left. The second thing is, immigration is the result of push and pull factors. When one's life is miserable and doesn't see a way to pull out of it, then one is pushed out of one's environment. An attractive alternative would be to pull the immigrant into a place that is pretty prosperous. And sometimes there is economical circumstances or maybe even political restrictions that might even limit their choices. So, why are there so many immigrants to the United States? Well, the United States has 6 natural resources that gives America the edge. We have what are called renewable resources. A renewable resource is one that is used at a slower rate than they are replaced. Those resources are like the water, the wind, sun, plants, animals. Now, those resources can become non-renewable if the rate they are consumed becomes so great that it drives the resource to exhaustion. For example, trees. In the paper industry, what if they cut down every single tree to make paper or lumber, and now we don't have any trees? Yeah, we can plant new ones, but do they grow overnight? That answer is no. So we have renewable resources, we have non-renewable resources. So those are the ones that are used faster than the earth replaces them, like oil, coal, natural gas, and minerals. Now, I'm going to read about these 6 natural resources to you. And I want you to look at the pie chart, and hopefully, I'm not sure if you can really read what the pieces say, but here we go. The United States is a large landmass that early on became governed by one political system. Its sheer size gave America an advantage in building its economy since it isn't bordered by an enemy. Only Australia and Canada are similar sized in this same situation. We also don't have any hostile neighbors, and that meant that the United States is not subject to invasion like China or Russia. The European nation is similar in size, but there isn't one national government. America's large landmass under one nation allows economies of scale in government and businesses. This advantage lowers the cost of providing goods and services. The United States is bordered by 2 large coastlines. That's the second natural resource that provide food and ports for commerce. America has over 95,000 miles of shoreline, including the Great Lakes, which border 26 of the 50 states. These coastlines create jobs such as tourism, ocean recreation, oil drilling, shipbuilding, transportation, and shoreline construction. Countries that are landlocked find imports and exports that are more expensive, and commerce could be dependent on another country's whims. And with no hostile governments bordering America, that allows the United States to develop peacefully without large war costs. Our third natural resource is fertile land. America has thousands of acres of fertile land thanks to the Great Plains, which of course is located in the Midwest where we are. This land encompasses 502,000 square miles between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains. Other advantages are the United States' temperate climates combined with the fertile soil. In glacial times, mountain streams deposited sediments, then cut through the sediment to create plateaus untouched by erosion, which in turn created thick sod and productive agriculture. The Great Plains, however, didn't become a breadbasket until irrigation was put into place, since this is a semi-arid region and lacks enough rainfall. Our fourth natural resource is an abundant supply of fresh water. Lakes, rivers, and streams provide 80% of water used in the United States. The electric power industry uses 41% of that fresh water, but it's returned to the supply after cooling electricity generating equipment. 31% of fresh water is used for agricultural irrigation, with an additional 20% being pumped out of the ground. Water used for this purpose is not returned to the water supply. The remaining 8% is used by families, businesses, and industry. America was once under a sea that created oil and coal reserves for our country. America has the world's largest reserve of coal. 27% of the world's total amount comes from the United States. This coal fueled America's growth during the Industrial Revolution by running steamships, steam-powered railroads, fueling iron blast furnaces that made steel, and ran the electricity generating plants. America also has huge reserves of oil that are easily accessible. This has given the United States many advantages, including, well, one, our Navy ships were converted to oil just before World War I, which made them faster and easier to refuel and went farther distances, including across the Pacific. And keep in mind, there is oil on the West Coast. We were able to have innovations such as cars, trucks, tanks, submarines, and airplanes. We even was able to create TNT, or dynamite, because that main ingredient is extracted from oil. Also, oil, as we could create power for internal combustion engines for machinery used in farming. The sixth one, the United States is easily accessible by ocean or land, and thereby open America's doors to new people through immigration. America has over 43 million immigrants, more than any other country. Immigrants had courage and the flexibility needed to survive in a new country. They were willing to take risks and subsequently help create a new and innovative culture, especially in technology. Most important is these diverse population of different cultures brought fresh ideas and innovation to business endeavors. These advantages have enabled America to become a major global economic power. Face it, the United States is pretty awesome. We just listed 6 reasons based solely on natural resources that the U.S. has to offer. Now, let's look at some other reasons why people immigrated to the United States. First, the very first census in 1790 showed that there were 2.5 million people in the original 13 states in 1776 in the United States. Now think about this. Remember how we started. There were 2 points about immigration that I made. One about the cost, the economical, emotional, and cultural. And remember that push-pull effect? Now, I used this YouTube video. It's called 100 Years of Immigration to the U.S. And I pulled some of those slides off of it for the next part of our discussion. But I want you to know that I focused only on 6 nations that immigrated here, because there's way too many to talk about in this, in this YouTube video. So I picked Germany, Italy, Russia, Great Britain, Canada, and Mexico. So each picture, as I show you, is of a different year. But because some immigrating countries lasted longer than a decade, details below my chart may not reflect the county at the top, or the country at the top. So here we go. Clear back in 1919, the first non-English speaking immigrant group to ever enter the United States in large numbers were German. 2 forces were paramount in prompting early German immigration: heavy taxation in German law that only allowed the oldest son to inherit their father's lands. Another motivation for the Germans to come here was the seemingly constant and disruptive German wars. During the late 18th century, the Industrial Revolution began transforming the economies of the many German states from agricultural to manufacturing bases, making it more difficult for farmers to prosper. The success of many early German immigrants in agriculture helped draw many German-born businessmen to the United States, where some of them built beer breweries that prospered along local agriculture. German immigration to the United States continued to grow until 1914, when World War I began in Europe. There was very little Italian immigration before 1870. However, Italy became overcrowded, the wages were low, and the taxes were high. There was a scarcity of cultivatable land, soil erosion, and deforestation. Italy also lacked coal and iron ore needed for industry. In 1930s, a large number of Italians who had opposed the fascist rule of Benito Mussolini arrived in America. There were also natural disasters that rocked southern Italy during the early 20th century. Mount Vesuvius erupted, then Mount Etna. In 1908, an earthquake and tidal waves swept through parts of Italy. Many people were killed, and a lot of people were dislocated from their homes. Widespread poverty and starvation cast a shadow over Russia during the late 1800s. A high portion of immigrants from the former Soviet Union had been Jewish in heritage. For these Jews, forced relocation to desolate areas coupled with ongoing persecutions and killings, called pogroms, inspired mass immigration. Many Jews died in these pogroms, which were violent riots aimed at the persecution and massacre of the Jews. Life in Russia was hard for the vast majority of people. Peasants were treated as serfs and worked on the land. Plots of land were frequently too small to sustain a family, and food often ran out. At this time, Russians looked toward the possibility of immigration to America. Russia also suffered from terrible cholera epidemics during the 1800s and the early 1900s, when riots erupted but were aggressively suppressed by the Russian government because, they weren't doing anything about the outbreaks. Russian immigration to the United States flourished due to the industrialization of America, especially in the late 1800s, which brought new technology and inventions that replaced steam power with electric power. The new American businesses encouraged Russian immigration as a source of cheap, unskilled labor. British immigration to what is now the United States has run in an unbroken line from 1607 into the 21st century. Jamestown was founded in 1607 by the Virginia Company of London as a commercial venture to earn quick profits. Convicts also came whose sentences were commuted to transportation. After the company went bankrupt in 1624, new immigrants kept coming because of the indenture system. This is where young men and women effectively sold themselves into servitude for fixed periods, at the end of which their masters were to give them capital and, at first, promise them land. The potato blight in 1845 and again in 1846 led the Irish to America due to starvation and an outbreak of typhus. Many left England for religious reasons. Others, with technological skills, also came to America. British immigration after World War II can be partly explained by the number of war brides who came to the United States after these women met and married American servicemen stationed in the United Kingdom during the war. A more significant reason was the great disparity in standards of living in post-war Britain and the United States. After World War II, the British once again saw America as a land of opportunity. The motives of Canadian migrants have changed over time. One basic cause of French-Canadian immigration was the unequal levels of industrial development and standards of living between Canada and the United States. Beginning in 1867, migrants from Eastern Canada came to the United States to work in manufacturing jobs. Others took up residence near the border to allow easy movement between the two countries in order to make a living. Some were driven by discrimination. Bottom line, jobs were easier to obtain in the USA and at better wages. By the 1830s and the 1840s, Quebec's most fertile farmland was occupied, leaving thousands of landless farmers searching for some type of gainful employment. Poverty, overpopulation, debt, and infertile soils pushed French Canadians off their land. Timber companies paid their employees with company scrip. That's money that is not government issued, and it's only good if you use it within that company. They also lent money at high interest rates and were the only market for the produce of local farms, thereby monopolizing the retail trade unfairly. The development of the railway also stimulated immigration. As North America's railroad network became more complex and affordable, immigrating to the United States became simpler and cheaper. Revolution in Mexico, political turmoil, religious reasons, and a strong U.S. economy brought a tremendous increase in Mexican immigration rates in the 20th century. New waves of immigrants, exiles, and refugees fled to the United States to escape the violence and economic disruption. Mexican workers filled the void when Europeans stopped coming. World War II and the Bracero Program, a U.S.-Mexico guest worker program intended to relieve farm worker shortages during the war, revived Mexican labor flows and set the stage for what would later become sustained mass immigration. U.S. employers, again, played an important part. Throughout the rest of the 19th century and early 20th century, Mexican immigration was not subject to any restrictions, and Mexicans were free to move across the border, and often did so, typically for work. Economic inequality, rural poverty, significantly lower wages, and better opportunities continued to play a role throughout the 20th century as factors that pulled Mexicans to migrate to the United States. So here are some things to think about. Remember, back in 1790, that first census showed that there were 2.5 million people here. The census of 2019 showed almost 330 million people in America. Now remember, the more people, the more resources are used to make the things we need. Prior to settlement, if you remember, those natural resources that they used were plants for food, energy, and clothes, animals for food, tools, and remember they traded them, land for farms, timber to make houses and build ships, and water. And there were boats on the water for travel and trade. In 1760, we had the steam engine that was created. In 1790, the Industrial Revolution happened where steel is replacing iron. The wars needed muskets and ammunition. Transportation was changing. In 1794, we had the cotton gin and its interchangeable parts. And in 1837, we had the steel plow from John Deere. And of course, in 1844, we had changes in communications with the telegraph. Do you see a change from renewable resources to the non-renewable resources? And how do you suppose immigration has affected natural resources in America, especially the non-renewable ones? How about not just in America? How about the human impact on the world? It took 200,000 years for the human population to reach 1 billion, but only 200 years for it to reach 7 billion. I used a video, and I would direct you to that. It was called The Human Population Through Time. And that's very interesting to follow up with how the numbers of people grew and where they grew. So with that being said, how can we minimize the impact on our Earth's resources as we are now approaching 11 billion people worldwide? In conclusion, the United States is blessed with both renewable and non-renewable natural resources. Its large landmass has no enemy borders, and we have a lot of fossil fuel deposits with thousands of miles of coastline. America is also blessed with fertile agricultural land and many freshwater sources. Most important is our diverse population of different cultures, which bring fresh ideas and innovation to businesses. These advantages have helped America to become a major global economic power. Thanks for listening. Bye.